Thanks, Jeff. Clifton, a little bit about Greenlight and...
All right, well, hi everyone. Thanks for having me. Thanks, Bob. My name is Clifton Dawson. I run a company called Greenlight Insights, based primarily in San Francisco. We're a market research firm. We focus specifically on these categories. And really understand the technology, the adoption, and synthesize that in market reports, market data. If you're familiar with Gartner, Forrester, we're very similar, but just very focused. What brought me into the industry 3 years ago when I started my firm was an interest in what Kevin just mentioned of millennials really gravitating toward the technology. Previously, I was working at Snapchat in LA, studying user behavior on that platform. Saw some really interesting things that led me to believe that this would be, by and large, adopted by the next wave of consumers. And so today, what we do is we primarily provide, Greenlight provides consumer insights, economic analysis, and trend reports in both reports, in data, and events. And just really excited to share my perspective with everyone here.
Cool, thank you. And Joanna, you've got a pretty diverse background, so interested to hear your insights on the industry. But
absolutely.
Yeah, let's give us 60 seconds on your background.
Sure. Hi, I'm Joanna Popper. Thanks, Bob, for inviting me. Bob and I met at Esalen Digital Rain, which was an Esalen conference on AI, AR, VR, and blockchain. So great to meet you there, and I'm so happy that you invited me here and put this together, so thank you. So I just joined HP about 5 weeks ago. I am heading up our location-based entertainment for virtual reality initiatives. So HP is a huge tech company, or as we all know, and we have a small entrepreneurial team that's really focused on virtual reality and building out the business around virtual reality. So we have focus on a couple of different industry sectors, and location-based entertainment is one of the primary sectors that we're focusing on now. So as Bob mentioned, I'm really new in the role, so really happy to meet you all and talk to you about how we can work together and what you'd like to see from us as we continue to grow out this business. My prior background, I ran media and marketing at Singularity University, which is focused on training leaders on the future of technology. And I ran consumer marketing for one of the brands of NBC Universal, so got to work across NBC Universal on their television properties, film properties, and theme parks as well. So have theme park experience from that part of my career. Prior to that, I was a Wall Street banker and a McKinsey consultant, but those tend to be less relevant in this part.
Cool, thanks. So the topic today in this panel is really kind of an overview of VR and what's happening, but I think specifically for people interested in this room and both operators and manufacturers and content providers is what's happening with VR adoption in the consumer markets. How might that impact location-based entertainment? Because one of the big fears that I hear from people is we've seen this game before, this movie before. We had an arcade industry in the 90s and the aughts, and it was undermined by this growth of console games, and our industry didn't really evolve quickly and nimbly enough to be able to stay ahead of it, and that wave just kind of crashed over us, and we saw a period of significant industry recession. And so a lot of people are concerned with VR starting out as a big consumer technology and all the hype around it. How should we be investing in VR for location-based entertainment? And so I thought we'd maybe start with Clifton a little bit and just kind of give us your overview of what's happening in the consumer sector and the LB sector, and how you're seeing the investment happening and the companies that are playing in that space. How are they viewing consumer versus LBE right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think starting with the consumer segment of the industry, I think there are a few things happening. When we started tracking the industry, we started with the consumer. We tried to understand, What did consumers understand about the technology? What were they most excited by? What were they most fearful of? And what we've seen over the last 3 years really has been a increase in the level of understanding. When you ask consumers, how much do you understand about this technology? What are you excited by? Are you interested in buying it? How much are you willing to spend on it? Those metrics are all on the increase, which is really, really positive, right? I think if you kind of look across the industry, what we're seeing is sort of new H&Ds, new form factors that are coming onto the marketplace that are really changing the landscape, right? Last year we saw several new manufacturers. This year you're seeing new form factors. You're seeing new categories of H&Ds, standalone H&Ds, highly customizable H&Ds. And that's really complicating the landscape. Complicating the landscape in terms of the dominant platforms, market shares are changing, the messages to consumers are being muddled. It's a really exciting time in the market, but it's also a really complex operating environment, right? Lots of choices from consumers, and I think that means that the industry is going to have to work through a lot of these sort of institutional challenges as it relates to consumers.
Cool. Joanna, you got anything
Sure.
to add to that?
Sure. So the way I'm often asked to speak about VR, AR, XR for marketers, for consumers, for brands, for business people, and one of the questions I'm asked a lot is, what is it going to take to get to widespread consumer adoption? And there's 5 or 6 factors that I look at that I think this is going to take. And so one is, continued technological improvement and form factor improvement, which Clifton just mentioned. Another is, you can't hear? It's muffled.
How's that? Can you hear us?
Where's
Just speak a little louder.
Can you hear it better now? Okay. All right. So the first I was saying that to get to consumer adoption, the first thing is technological advancement. The second is great content that people really want to see or watch or engage with. The third for me, and what we're here talking about, is location-based entertainment, because I believe it's a lot easier to get somebody to buy a ticket, to come to an event, a ticket for $10 to $40, $50 than it is to have somebody drop 3 digits or 4 digits for the equipment and then try to figure out how to use it at home. The fourth is social experiences, which location-based entertainment actually covers the social experience in a lot of cases. And then the fifth is how we market and talk about this to consumers, because we're simultaneously building a new market, and we're also bringing you with a whole new experience. So it's sort of a double, when you're marketing your locations or your experiences, you're having to sort of do that double level of marketing. So I think, it's really exciting to see so many people here, and so many people that are focused on virtual reality and location-based entertainment or interested in growing that out, because I think this area is going to be one of the very key areas in helping virtual reality grow, and where many people are going to have their first amazing virtual reality experience.
All right, so that's a great controversial start. So one of the things that I when I talk to people in the VR space, especially in the tech space that are building these platforms.
Controversial.
Yeah, and
that's great. That's even better. I didn't think I was being controversial. I was being controversial.
Yeah, that's the cool part, right?
So self-controversial.
So the president of Vive product, so HTC has this product called the HTC Vive. They have this thing called Viveport Arcade, which is a way for content providers to offer their content directly to VR arcade operators for license. So think of it as like an app store for VR arcades. And one of the things that they came out with, and the thing that they feel is stopping adoption on the consumer side, is that there's a context challenge. Nobody knows why they would want to spend thousands of dollars to buy VR equipment and deal with all of the stuff that you have to deal with in the home. So he's basically saying, what we want to do is we want to get all of these entrepreneurs to build VR arcades to educate people around the equipment and how great it is, so they'll buy it in their home, and then, in essence, making the arcades obsolete, potentially. And I feel like that's just a shitty position to take, who's somebody who doesn't understand. I don't think it was intentional. I don't think he understood what he was really getting into when he said that. And so, so one of the things I have, and I'm going to throw this over to Kevin, is we've talked a lot about consumer adoption, and you've seen a bunch of my presentations in this. What's happening? You're seeing it in LBE. You're seeing a lot of adoption in LBE, VR, and experiences coming out. And you consult for half of the industry. Like, what are their opinions? How is the industry, the people that are investing in VR experiences, how do they feel about consumer adoption? Are they worried about it? Is it something that
they know the consumer? So I've been through the VR roller coaster a number of times, and this is the latest. I call this phase 4. I think you do as well, Bob. We've seen the application of virtual reality technology into the amusement sector, not the arcade sector, the amusement. We mean family entertainment centers, we mean resorts, theme parks, location-based entertainment, call it what you want. We need products that we can generate revenue from. That's all we care about. We don't care what color the technology is. We don't care how many investors they've got at their Kickstarter. We need product. And fundamentally, when you go onto the show floor here tomorrow, you will see a large number of machines hoping to prove themselves as being able to do one thing: generate ROI. And that's all we care about. The technology is immaterial.
But you have to generate ROI before it becomes obsolete,
of course.
Right? And that's, I think, with a rapidly escalating, as Clifton was talking about, a rapidly escalating growth curve regarding innovation on the technical side. Can people get their return on investment in commercial VR before it's worthless?
Well, everybody's telling us that we're going to have mass adoption in 2020. I don't care. All I care about is that these products do what they say on the side of the tin. Because we've been through this where the products promised something fantastic, they didn't deliver. Just so you understand, the consumer sector is very, very concerned. They were led to believe that they would have mass adoption of virtual reality in all the homes. Everybody would have a shoebox on their head, and they would be blowing $1,000 a go to have the joy of dedicating part of their rec room to virtual reality. Didn't happen. So now you're looking at a giant pivot. People are turning their super tankers from going for the consumer sector, and now they're going for the out-of-home entertainment sector. And sadly, there's a lot of people learning the hard way that this isn't an easy industry, and that there are rules, regulations, and applications. I've been dealing with VR arcade operators that haven't even got liability insurance, and they're looking at you going, well, do I need that if I'm going to run an arcade? These are the guys that think that they're going to take over the amusement sector? I don't think so.
Joanna, you were looking to jump in there.
I was going to say that I don't see it. It's good insight for me to see that was a controversial statement.
I thought it was controversial. I don't know if anybody else did.
But I think I wasn't saying it. Well, I'm always happy to start a controversy, but I wasn't thinking that was the way I think of it is that the out-of-home experience will likely offer something better and more than what is offered at home. So it offers a social element, it offers experiences that are next level. If you look at The Void, or you look at Dreamscape, or you look at Nomadic, or even some of the things that IMAX VR is putting in their locations, that takes it to the next level. So all of the best experiences that I have done in VR fall under the category of location-based entertainment VR. They're not, something that you could do at home. And so I think if the industry, as all parts of the industry progress, if the out-of-home segment keeps being a couple steps ahead of the at-home, then it's not, then it's not there just to market for us having it at home. I mean, we still have amusement parks, we still have movie theaters, we still have bars, despite the fact that you can technically do all those things at home in one way or another. Yeah. But people want to come and gather. People want to have experiences with each other, and they want to do things that they can't do at home. And so I think that's how I'd be thinking. I don't see it necessarily going the way of the internet cafe, which was kind of a stopgap until we got to broadband. But that as long as the experiences keep developing and continuing to be excellent, that there's a place for them.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a really important point that at its best, it offers something that is truly distinctive, that is premium, that consumers are willing to pay for. But I think the reality currently is that the channel, and if we look at LBE as a channel, and regardless of the segment we look at, you'll find countless examples. I think the overwhelming majority of venues don't live up to its highest aspiration. I think if that changes, I think the channel will be very healthy. There'll be really positive spillover effects to the in-home market. But I think what keeps me up at night, and again, I'm as interested in the broad industry growing as anyone, is that the rate of opens, the rate of failures, the rate of repeat, or the rate of attrition is so staggeringly high in some channels that it's still a little scary.
Can you
This is
elaborate?
always part of the beginning of any new application of technology in our sector. We have great aspirations, there's a lot of churn, but that churn doesn't mean that this is a failed concept. It just means that it's going to take a lot of work. What Bob has brought here is there are going to be a large number of people who are going to be sitting up here on stage that are talking about the next application of this technology that is much more than what, from my point of view, and forgive me, but the failed original approach to VR in the home. Now we're going to take that ball and run with it. And so you look at the nomadics, you look at the dreamscapes and the voids, and you're seeing a compelling next generation application of immersive entertainment that just happens to be VR. Sorry, Bob.
Clifton, talk a little bit about the attrition rates you're talking. Do you have any numbers you can share with us as far as like opens and close and repeat play? And that's really interesting.
Yeah, I think so. There are a few sort of metrics that I think really matter at this stage. One is what percentage of a person who comes in let's say VR arcade comes back a second time, right? We know from our polling that anywhere from 35 to about a third, or about a third say like someone comes in the door, they don't come back again. And that's really scary, right?
Yeah.
To someone who has to make a fixed investment in a location and has to operate that successfully. Sort of anecdotally, I think we all people who visit venues on a regular basis can see it firsthand. On my first trip to Beijing, you found there were at the very best locations in Beijing, there were new arcades popping up. You go back 6 months later, the people are outside of the store offering coupons, trying to drive traffic in. The third time, that location is clearly on the out. I think there are stories like that everywhere you look, which.
Do you know how those numbers compare with, say, bars or restaurants or some other factor? Because lots of places that open don't end up making it.
For sure, and I think that's important to sort of compare both within the channel, so within all the different segments that that for which you'll find VR installations, and then across sort of entertainment spending broadly.
Right.
Yeah.
Like what else that retail space could have been used for? How that compares?
Yeah. So I don't have that in front of me, but I do think it's a important question to ask, particularly if you're on the investment side, right? You have options, and that option needs to be compared across the myriad of choices.
So one of the things that I've doing a lot of research on is around adoption on the consumer side, because I think that's I think so. There's two risks that I think we're identifying. One is, do people want to do VR in out of home, and are the experiences good enough to drive people to have repeat play, and can you have an ROI? And there's all of these business metrics, and then there's the whole bigger consumer adoption thing, and which is, I think, challenge. There's headwinds there because of the fact that it's isolating technology, and it's a bit awkward to use, and it requires a lot of room in the living room. And there have been some really, really successful consumer technology. I use Xbox Connect as an analog. Xbox Connect was the fastest selling consumer electronics device in history. And they sold tens of millions of units, and it required you to have, move some furniture in your living room to be able to play it. And the product manager for Xbox Connect, when they finally killed it, and I talked to him, he said there were three things that killed that product. One was there weren't enough great games, which we're definitely seeing, I think, in the VR space. And I know we have some content providers here, and there's a lot of interest in creating great social games, but there's not enough of those right now. The second thing is, I love this quote, it was 85% awesome and 15% frustration. And I think that, I think VR is probably closer to 50-50 than 85-15, awesome and frustration. There's a lot of frustration in getting it all to work. It's not plug and play. You got to calibrate it and put cameras up, and I mean, it's a massive pain in the ass, frankly. And then the third thing, I don't know that the third thing matters, but I don't remember what it was right now. I can only remember two things.
It doesn't matter because you don't remember it.
I do not color my hair gray. It is naturally gray. But how is the new technology that's coming out as far as like inside-out tracking and standalone headsets, like Oculus Go, Joanna, is any of that going to change that and make it more awesome and less frustrating? And what's happening on the game development side? Are we seeing, do game developers, is there enough of a business for them to survive? That's like my concern, is even if game developers want to create great content, is there enough of an industry there for them to make any money?
Just a couple questions. So I do think that all the continued advances in form factor and in technology will very much positively impact the industry. As it becomes much easier to set up, as it becomes easier to troubleshoot, as frame rates get better, and any sort of nausea or anything, some of the impacts that some people have decrease, that will be positive for everyone. I think that is there enough business for game developers to survive? There are certainly some game developers doing really well, but they are very much looking to location-based entertainment as a place that's going to help grow the business and help them survive. And, there are quite a few game developers who and their game developers are some of the top-selling games who originally were focusing on at home and then saw the growth from the location-based sector and put a lot more of their energy and attention into location-based. And so, even going so far potentially as to open their own locations to learn about how to best work with location-based entertainment players. And so I think that this sector here will be a big thing in driving that monetization across the industry.
We've seen companies like Survios who have one of the most successful games in this very complicated and dangerous consumer application, pivot their supertanker and now go for location-based entertainment. We've got companies like Starbreeze, a very successful consumer games developer, who've had to pivot their supertanker and now are sailing towards the waters of out-of-home entertainment rather than depending on consumer. And that's really where we as an industry need to help shape, mentor and direct these kinds of companies, because they're breaking into uncharted waters. Most of their investors didn't give them money to make a couple of million in the out-of-home entertainment. They gave them a couple of million to make billions in the consumer space of VR. And again, as Bob's excellently said, we need content. This is a content-driven industry. And so we need to also help these guys understand the requirements of making content that works in the crucible of out-of-home entertainment.
Yeah, I think one thing about the need for high quality content. I think one thing that gets overlooked oftentimes is the question of branded IP, and one thing that you hear a lot from both consumers as well as operators is it's not enough to give me a game that has really great mechanics and that's social, but you need that driving factor, and I think the fact that we see more and more brands sitting on the sidelines, kind of waiting to lend their IP to a VR title, I think is I'd like to see that.
I'm not sure how much of that.
I see most of the big IPs
I think
They've all dabbled a toe in it. You know,
Yeah.
Disney's here, Universal's
They're all
here.
Sony has
Yeah, but
Spielberg's put money into out of home.
Yeah.
There are plenty of examples.
I mean,
completely
I think
agree,
most of
right?
the four quadrant, most of the four quadrant movie titles that think that there would be a play here, the type of movie that would think there was a play, I think they're all
Watching,
Do-
investing.
Well, they're all asking for 50% of the cash box. They're all asking for 50% of the cash box of the problem. And so, like, as the people in this room know, there's no fucking way, they're going to get 50% of the cash box, right? So, it's just not going to happen. And so there's got to be some empathy and shared understanding between these segments that are coming together.
I'm hearing people start talking about revenue sharing again.
Yeah.
You know, this is something that the amusement industry has gone through with bitter claws. So part of the reason why the location-based entertainment industry ploughed into the ground at high speed last time was part of the metrics of where the money was coming from.
I still have bruises from asking for 20% of the cash box at ECAST. So, in fact, I think one of those guys is sitting right there. So I think that's the challenge. They're interested, but their expectations are absolutely crazy.
My experience, just from having done so many of the experiences, that the big IP is not necessarily the best experience, but I do think that's what will drive traffic.
Yeah.
And so, you know, if you have numerous experiences at your venue, that it may take a big IP to bring people in, but then, you know, and help them get excited about coming to do a VR experience. But then once they're there, it might be something like Life of Us, you know, which is not known IP, but, you know, an amazing team that created it, that's going to actually be a much better and more fun experience that people are going to want to do again and again. But the big IP will probably drive people in the door, similar to TV, to film, like how, you know, how
And that's a little bit about how we've seen people make a mistake about how to break into this sector. A lot of people are borrowing from the cinema approach to the business rather than from the out-of-home entertainment, the amusement, the attraction approach. The IP's king, content's king. You know, I will always go on about the quality of the content. But, you know, if you're a cinema operator, Terminator 2 was a great film, but you still don't run Terminator 2 in your cinema. You move on to the next film and the next film. We're seeing a lifespan for content in VR application between 4 months. That's a real short time. And the reason why we're seeing such a short time is because it's difficult to get repeat audiences. So one thing that the amusement industry knows is how to get people to come back again. And that's something that the new VR applications need to know. That the opening of the Servios VR arcade was an incredibly successful opening, but they are now seeing the reality of how difficult it is to get people to come back again.
So a couple of comments just from, and I just want to remind you, sorry, as my computer keeps going to sleep, and I will change that setting after this panel, but
Get the Brit off the stage.
yeah, a couple of questions. One is, so one comment is, a location-based VR developer should aim to make a game that takes how long to play. So what's the optimal, and we have a content panel coming up, but I'll get what's the optimal length? Like, how long should a VR experience, do you think, be? And I know, Clifton, you've got some data, actually, from one of your research reports. I think, and I'll tell you what it was. It was 30 minutes, so in case you don't remember. But I think that what people were saying is that, like, in order to get up off their couch and to travel somewhere, there needed to be longer experiences. These 7, 10, 12-minute experiences might not be enough. What kind of insights have you seen there?
You know, I won't answer, you know, I'm curious in what these guys have to say about this particular question, but I was actually asked this question in a panel on Saturday, and it was in the context of, advertising and sort of, you know, do we need people stuck in a headset for a long period of time for there to be real value there, right? And it's something that I've been sort of noodling on for a very long time, because as I mentioned, I came from Snapchat, where we had a very progressive view of it's not about the length, the duration of the experience, but it's about the sort of power of the experience, right? And I think we haven't settled to that point yet, and it's going to take a little while to get there, but my gut feeling on this is that it's going to be very short, powerful experiences that are very well crafted, that drive the greatest value for consumers, and then in turn operators. It's not going to necessarily be the longest, experience.
You're mirroring the argument. Is it about the duration or is it about the cash box? How much money you've generated? And we're seeing some interesting metrics where if you can generate within a certain number of minutes a certain cash flow, the magical 3 minutes, $20 argument that's been going around in some VR arcades, compared to the high-end free roaming VR experiences where you can charge a premium price because you're offering a premium social experience.
Yeah, one of the powerful things about VR is it has the power to transform. It's like, you know, it's because it's so immersive. I mean, they're using it in things like therapy to get rid of phantom limb pain and amputees. Like, so if you can make people believe that they have limbs that they've lost in VR, you can almost do anything, right? So if we can figure out how to create these really high impact experiences, what could you charge for that? Like, what would, you know, not that should be monetized, but just as an analog, if you lost your arm, what would you pay to go through an experience that made you feel like you had your arm and make the phantom pain go away? So I think that I think from an ROI standpoint, as we figure out what's possible and how to do really transformational experiences, we're going to figure that out.
Well, Bob and myself did what I would say was one of the most immersive entertainment experiences we've ever done, and it didn't involve a head-mounted display. I would say the Pandora simulator allowed us to A, feel that we were avatars on Pandora, B, that we were soaring on the back of an animal.
I got my first barrel.
Never. The issue is, that's old technology, but it created a fantastic immersive experience, and so we need to see that level of engagement put through the new machines that are being developed. And again, it's not about the consumer system, it's not about the hype, it's not about the novelty, it's about the experience. Experiential.
Cool. There's another comment on here, a question about game development, how long the game should be, and how much can you sell it for? And we've got a couple of other panels coming up around game development and marketing and positioning and pricing that we'll be talking about. But as far as like what you guys are seeing, like as far as game length, and we've talked about like how long does it be? Everything seems to be in that short. Joanna,
like
what do you see?
I think everything I've seen is probably 8 to 15 minutes, but you know, a lot of the places they come in, put on, you know, have a video, a preview video, put on gear, you know, take your selfie, take off, you know, do the experience, take off gear, talk with your friends for a minute, you know, then I like skip the sign in with your avatar and all that. So by the time you're done, it's anywhere for 30 minutes to an hour, depending for everything I've seen. But the actual in headset in experience is I think 8 to 13, 15 minutes on the high end. That's not the conversation around you know. There's also places that do that $1 a minute.
Throughput, yeah.
So I think obviously it all depends on. I don't think that there's a magic number. I don't have data that I can point to on what that is. I think it's going to come down to what's that throughput that you need, and how do you keep increasing that throughput to make the economics work.
So Brent Bushnell, who's our keynote tonight, and I highly recommend if you're going to bop in and out today to be here for that. He talked in one of his presentations recently about this curve between immersion and throughput, and that there's a trade-off. The really highly immersive experiences are going to generally be lower throughput, but potentially really higher value because of the impact of those experiences. And then on the other side, there's higher throughput, which might have lower immersion and therefore lower value and lower price per game. And you need to decide where you want to be on that spectrum on an experience-by-experience basis. I thought that was really an insightful comment.
Yeah, I think that's really profound. I mean, like I was saying before, I mean, you really have to look across the landscape and recognize that this is already a highly segmented channel with just the unit economics of a mall-based arcade with 2 to 4 pods versus a free roam multiplayer amazing half an hour long experience, right?
But that's the dark ride, isn't it? That's borrowing from the theme park industry approach. We're now taking so much from the theme park application of entertainment and shoehorning it into location-based entertainment applications.
Yeah, cool. So we've got a couple of minutes for some live questions from the audience. If anybody has any questions for the panel.
You talked about needing content. What kind of content do you think the industry needs?
So what kind of content does the industry need? I'm just going to repeat for the live stream audience. Yeah.
Socially inclusive, large audiences, small audiences, durational, so it isn't just teenagers shooting stuff. It is also the explore, the wonder. If you look at what our friends have done with Dreamscape, they've created a exploratory narrative rather than a competitive narrative. Esports is something that a lot of people are now looking at as an application for these kinds of systems. And then finally, the big one, successful content.
Content that makes money, that people are willing to pay for. I think social, I mean, from my perspective, social is a big one. Like people don't, and you had another one of your research reports talked about what people were willing to do, right?
Yeah, and I think in the context of a venue, it's like asymmetrical sort of gameplay, right? Whereby you're not just thinking about the person in the headset or the people in the headset, but you're thinking about like, how do you keep the people who are there kind of engaged, right? Participating in the experience, even though they're not directly in the experience.
Audience.
Yeah, and there are very few developers that are really thinking about the entirety of the experience. And so once you find that, and we can talk about the examples.
I definitely agree with everything there, but also thinking about, how can you make those experiences help you with your marketing of your venue? So how do you add on social elements that people are going to want to post, elements that people, that have that viral nature, so that you can have those people help you get the word out, I think is also helpful. And then the other thing is that if you have more than one, if you have multi-experiences in your venue, and if the experiences you have are not that AAA or 4-quadrant, how do you make sure that you have a variety of experiences so that you can do cross-family and you have something for everybody or something for different interests?
So when you talk about 4-quadrant, can you explain that?
Sure. It's
a McKinsey thing, right?
No, it's not a McKinsey thing. It's actually a film thing. So in the gaming, big blockbusters are called AAA. In film, they're called 4-quadrant, and it really just means that it will attract young people, old people, women, and men. So each quadrant is, like young men, old men, young women, old women. So any huge blockbuster movie would be 4-quadrant.
It's really interesting.
And they all feed off of each other, because if you bring in the kids, they bring in the families, and so that's why the quadrant works.
So we had a question over, Hi, Robert.
My apologies, I'm sorry.
Feels to me like a lot of these VR attractions are going to go into FPCs or the concepts of that's food and beverage. What kind of role do you think that's going to play in making?
So the question is, what kind of role is F&B and ancillary revenue services going to play in kind of VR, location-based VR industry?
I think it's massive. I think you can look at any publicly traded company, and you can see that the majority of their revenue comes from non-game entertainment spend right at their locations. I think within the VR industry, the VR arcade in particular space, I think there's a lot of room to grow that operation. When we do our polling of operators, and we query, how do they make their money, where's the growth coming from? I'm still surprised at the fact that you're not finding more revenue coming from food, beverage, merchandise, events. But that changes over time.
I can give you a real-world example. Coca-Cola last year did a deal with a company called Mediamation to put virtual reality motion pods in every cinema, keynote cinema, as a promotional tool. So you've got the Magic 4 there. You've got a large brand, IP, beverage, cinema, VR, motion-based. You've got all of the big ticks. And they found it a great promotional tool. But this is something that I'm concerned about. Is VR more than just a promotional tool? You look at The Void, and that's really a promotional tool for Star Wars. We need to see these things stand on their own 2 feet, as not just as a promotional tool, but as also a revenue generator. Sorry.
Cool. I think I have time for one more question. I'm going to go with Rick.
Joanna, this is a question. 2 questions. I have 2 questions. The first one is, it's exciting to see a company like
lot of assets, a lot of money, and hopefully a lot of emotion for what you're going to do. Is HP going to be just a content provider, or are they going to be content and hardware?
So the strategy of HP is to be a trusted partner for anyone developing, creating, experiencing VR. And our team really is just getting started. But so right now we have a number of different hardware options that we can offer right now. So we have. This is not a commercial, but since you specifically asked, we have the computer backpacks, which work really well for any free roam experience, and then we have high-end computers that work really well for any VR experience. We make one of the Windows mixed reality headsets as well, and then we also we resell the Vives for anyone who's looking to bundle in a package, and we're looking at doing device as a service. So we know that that's an interesting possibility for a lot of the players who may not want to put out all the capex up front, before the revenue starts coming in. But that's something that we would offer on that you would pay for on an ongoing basis, where we would continue to own the equipment and help you maintain it and service it. But happy to talk to anybody about any more specifics. We're also very much early in this process, and so we're continuing to iterate and improve what we do have and bring out more opportunities. And definitely very much looking for feedback about what would be most interesting and what kind of services and what kind of software you would want added on to any hardware that we offer.
And Rick, it's exactly like the arcade PC back in the 90s. We're seeing companies like Intel, we're seeing companies like AMD who are wanting to establish favorite partners.
But I will say, I invited all those companies, and HP is the only of the big tech companies that showed up, so that's where. Second question, Rick. We've got time for a couple more, so go ahead.
Question two. Kevin, you said over and over, content is made, content is made, content is made. There's no question. I've been doing this a long time, and there's no question. That's what it's all about. It's about the cash box. So you have a lot of developers here, which thank you for coming and being involved in our industry. The question becomes is that you also have some different hardware providers. How adaptable will the content be to some of these hardware?
Yeah.
Somebody zeroes in on hardware, you get a large bit. And how adaptable will software in the future for different developing companies be able to be used for?
So the question from Rick is, how does the content shape the hardware, or does the hardware shape the content, and how does this fit into the market? The issue we're seeing now is we could be at the jammer moment. I don't know how many of you remember the good old days back in the 90s when the Japanese amusement industry created the jammer standard, where there was a standard box and content developers targeted that. There is a hope that maybe we will see a number of platforms out there that are open source where content can be put onto it. But I'm sadly getting the feeling that we're going to see a lot of walled gardens going up. A lot of gated compounds, where we had the attempt by Viveport to create a little bit of world there. We've got companies like Springboard and Private Label that create their own platforms. But also we've got free roaming systems like VR Studios that are reaching out to more developers and bringing people in. It's a mixture of the two. We're waiting for that Space Invaders moment. It's going to come really soon, with that game that draws people not to, hey, I want to try that new VR game, but I want to try that product right now. When we get to that stage, the content providers will follow.
Yeah, I think I think part of the challenge is, it's all consumer technology right now that we're all bundling together into commercial applications and solutions. Because of that, you actually do get a lot of interoperability today. But then you're naturally going to see companies who want to defend their turf. So they get an installed base of hardware or platform, and then the question is it a big enough economic opportunity for them to open it up for third-party development? And so, Zero Latency has 20 sites, and we've had people say, can you do can we do content development for you? And I'm like, well, maybe one company could, because economically, if you have 5 companies developing for 20 sites, nobody makes any money. You're diluting the dollars. And so I think that what you'll probably see is the emergence of a couple of hardware platforms that get big scale quickly. I think Hollowgate is one of those companies, Greg Catano's here, that got a massive head start in partnering with CreativeWorks, and they've got a lot of momentum. And so something like that could have like a couple of hundred installations by the end of this year, all of a sudden you could potentially get some third-party development, and then create some standards around that. But right now, it's going to be the Wild West for a little while, I think. Hi, Shauna. So, questions. There were a couple other hands that came up. You had one. Yeah.
I was curious about revenue per square foot. How is that going to play? If you compare VR to a laser tag arena, obviously the zero latency is a huge footprint. I'd be scared to see what that revenue per square foot is per month on that.
And don't forget the operators.
Yeah.
Laser tag, just 2 operators for 30 people going through compared to 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
I think there's 2 big metrics that you have to look at there. One is, and again, this guy's into immersion and throughput, versus that scale. And if you're going to run a big footprint with a few people, you got to have the courage to charge a lot of money. And I definitely see a lack of that in the amusement industry. And then the other piece is, how many people does it take to run that facility? So I was just at Dreamscape Immersive in LA, and it was a 6-person experience. They had 5 employees, and they were charging $30, and the whole thing was about an hour. And so you could quickly do the math and know they're running 50% labor rates in Westfield, Century City, where the rent is through the roof.
To be fair, that's a pop-up.
I was going to say that. That's a pop-up, and they're testing consumer adoption. It's a 60-day trial. But I also talked to the head of operations. I spent an hour and a half with him over coffee that day, and he's like, yeah, that's a real challenge, and that's why they brought me in to try to solve that problem. And so there are still a lot of economic models that are still being fleshed out. And I would say that it's really early days, and you got to have a really sharp pencil before you make the investment. Question?
The hardware that we currently use, some of it is quite cumbersome, and some of them are very little. Do you see the evolution going to less hardware and more mind? Use rather than apparatus.
Interesting.
So you've got companies like, the question was, the technology is cumbersome, unreliable, brittle. Are we going to see a move towards less hardware? Paraphrase the question. The issue from some of the companies that we're consulting with now are taking the technology from the consumer and trying to redevelop it for out of home. So you look at companies like Servios, who are taking their HMD, a head-mounted display, and trying to create it to be suitable for out-of-home. Sorry, I didn't mean Servios, I meant Sensec, do apologize. Who are trying to apply that technology for out-of-home. Wearing a backpack, having to put markers on your feet, wearing gloves, having a head-mounted display that's robust enough to go onto not just an adult's head, but also a young teenager's head. These are all difficult things. And when we're talking about mixed reality technology, we're now looking at frictionless technology. So trying to get away from the head-mounted display, trying to go for maybe 3D projection mapping in an immersive environment. And hopefully we'll find a middle ground where the technology doesn't blow up, but also it feels invisible to use it.
Joanna?
So everyone who's making hardware is working on making it less cumbersome and less complicated. So I think as we keep, we're I guess 2 years out from the first commercial headset that even came onto the market. I guess the birthday will be in March, I think. So we're like less than 2 years. It's very much of a toddler, and so every piece of hardware, I think every hardware manufacturer is working on improving that experience. So until we get to a place where it really becomes not cumbersome and much less seamless. I think we're still a little bit away for it to be not cumbersome at all. It's still very seamless, but everyone is continuously working on improvements.
And I would say that if it doesn't get a lot less cumbersome, you're not going to see the consumer adoption, because 3D TV died essentially because people didn't want to even put on glasses. And there was a little bit of discomfort. 7% of the people self-reported that they got headaches in watching 3D TV in the home, and that was enough of a headwind to really stop 3D TV adoption after massive investment by both content providers, network providers, and hardware manufacturers. So it's going to happen, if they're going to hit the scale that they want to hit.
And also in that case, the wow factor of what you were getting with 3D TV just wasn't there enough for people to want to go through that. So that's where if the content is such a great experience that it is worth putting on the headset, then we'll have people continue to play in this area. But I definitely want to stress that everyone is trying to improve that and trying to improve it as fast as possible.
Cool.
The wow factor against the reality of the experience when they meet in the middle.
Last question.
What percent of the users report nausea with the worst VR? Can you pick up that? Or discomfort?
Yeah, it's a good
I have a
question.
number in my head, but I think it's wrong, so I don't want to say it. It's less than 20%, I want to say. But that's a high number.
I would say 20.
It's
20 is a high number.
20 would be a very high number.
I think it's lower than that. Do you guys know? It's more with women than men also, unfortunately.
Sadly, I have a problem with the discomfort question because there's so many different experiences. So if you're using a system as a VR arcade product, if you're using it as a free roaming system, if you're using it as a theme park ride system, if you're using it on a roller coaster system, there are different metrics. And I can go through the numbers that we have collected for our own personal research. They don't matter.
Yeah.
They really don't matter.
Also,
what really matters is the experience good for the player.
Yeah, I think the other reason that I don't agree with you that it doesn't matter is actually I think it's more about the perception, right? So when you ask people like, what's stopping you from putting on the headset? What's stopping you from buying? I think there's probably a higher percentage of people who state fear of injury, fear of getting sick, of long-term effects than those who actually experience those things. So I think it kind of goes back to your question also of like how do you actually message around this?
So if you have 8 players playing, but consistently one of them is experiencing some sort of discomfort and full immersion, and then you tell their friends about it, how do you rectify this? Is this part of the technology?
Goes back to the question of the question was if we have 8 players in there and one of the individuals isn't having a good time, how do you deal with that? It goes back to having quality staff. You can see very early on that someone is not experiencing a good time in VR, and it doesn't just have to be discomfort. It can also, some people don't like putting a box on their head. Some people, may not feel comfortable in that, and there's where the operator comes in, pulls them out of the experience, deals with the situation. If it persists, which you're leading to, then we have to address it in making sure that individual comes away feeling that they were treated well when they were uncomfortable. Because if they weren't treated well, as you were saying, they'll go back and complain to their friends.
Also, maybe it has to do with making sure that the headset is on correctly. And then frame rate and
frame rate,
frame rate in the game, and so
having a good computer.
Yeah,
I think that look, one of the challenges with VR is context, and your employees have to be able to sell it to your customers, and part of that is going to be overcoming fear, uncertainty, and doubt when they approach you and they say, hey, I'm afraid of VR. I had a bad VR experience, and and so I took a shower once and the water was too hot and I burned myself, but it didn't stop me from taking another shower. So I think you have to. I think it's a real issue, and I'm concerned about it from a perception standpoint. And it's something that we just have to sell through, and we have to not put out shitty VR experiences. Like I was just at EAG and IAPA, and I walked around 2 hours from IAPA, and I couldn't do any more VR because I was ready to puke. And so, do it yourself, and if you start breaking out in sweats, just politely walk away, and don't buy it. Seriously, don't put out shit that's going to make people sick. And don't say, oh, well, only 10%. No. Force the developers to create product and the content providers to create product that don't make people nauseous. And then that'll wash itself out of the industry. And you guys are the gatekeepers to that.
Yeah, we have to break the hype cycle. This is VR, fantastic. This technology is great, fantastic. Is it a good experience? That's what we're here for. And another thing about the operator, I know from the amusement industry's point of view, they've been very lucky to have had great staff that have managed to put people through entertainment. VR and immersive entertainment takes a much higher quality of staff sell, which is a difficult aspect that we all need to bear in mind.
So, I want to thank you guys. That was fun. Hopefully you guys learned something. These guys are going to to be hanging around. I know, Kevin, you're going to be over at the laser tag for a while and then be back this afternoon to moderate a panel. Hopefully Clifton and Joanna are going to stick around. And we've got a quick break before our next panel. Which will be Strategic Vision. I'm really excited about this one with George, Greg, Charles, and Sean. So we'll see you in a few minutes. Hey, Dre. Thank you so much. Getting some comments about the so I'm going to try to switch over to the okay. Such a pleasure having you. Thank you very much. Gonna be back or? Cool.
Talk about
yeah. How's it going, man? So, okay. No, I can run it right off of here.
Oh, you can?
Yep.
Bob, you know, you've got to be here.
Sorry. No. crazy, yeah.
So we'll figure it out.
Yeah. How long are you here for? Okay, perfect.
If you want some sensible, then you've got
I'm going to try to use the microphone and do audio from here. Chuck's at registration. Tell him he doesn't need his badge, just to get in here.
Oh, it's not a small room.
You can steal the white. Just plug. Are you on an iPhone? Just use that.
So we have to deal with people that are worried.
Testing 1, 2.
We have to deal with the people that are uncomfortable while they're on it, and then we have to deal with the